Okay, the reason Brian has been so gracious to offer me this time to present to you is because I'm an antique. I mean, I've been in radio for a lot longer than I can even imagine, and it wasn't an intention. It just worked out that way. And I entered radio and didn't realize when I entered radio that I was working in analog. Nobody told me it was analog until digital came along. I thought, oh, okay, what the heck is analog? And it took a little time to figure out. Anyhow, so I had a job in newscasting, and I loved it. I enjoyed it for a period of time. I was a newscaster, a reporter. I was out at Diablo Canyon every day, a stringer for UPI is what it was called. Then I don't think they're in business anymore. They were competition for Associated Press, United Press International, and I was hired by them. I was working as a news director at a local radio station that went under. And the day after it went under, I got 2 job offers. One at Cuesta College to teach radio, and newscasting especially, and the other at this little public radio station downtown where I had been volunteering for about 7 years. So it was a perfect fit because they wanted me in the afternoon and Cuesta wanted me in the morning. So this was a perfect fit, and I did that for a number of years until I was hired as a permanent music director, and from there I became the program manager and stayed in that position until 2011. Since then, I have branched out on my own. I am, as Brian used the term, syndicating, and it is syndicating, although I don't want to use it as a braggart position. It's not like I have hundreds and hundreds of stations out there clawing for the program. Not yet. Not yet. Clarification. But I do have quite a number carrying the programs periodically. So I can count on KUMN to be there every 2 or 3 weeks, and they'll be carrying the program. New Zealand Public Radio, which, by the way, pays very well.
Currency conversion.
No Kiwis.
Yeah. Australian dollar.
Yeah, it's surprising, but I do okay with that. So I've been doing that for 7 years. I had a web page for a period of time, and then I found out I was actually pulling business away from PRX. I was better off just using the PRX website, Public Radio Exchange website. And there they promote my shows. They do all the work for me. All I do is the interviews, and it works out just fine. And I don't have to buy extra space for all the programs. 7 years worth of hundreds of hours of programs that I now have. I still do 2 regular broadcasts every week. One is Ideasphere, and that program is dealing with current news, current events, current activities, geopolitical, climate change, you name it, I do it. Education is especially important to me. I like the idea of promoting different ideas in education in the field. And then I go to the modern day broadcasting, and that is 78 recordings. You know what those are? Oh, that's encouraging. Okay. I have a massive collection of 78 RPM recordings, and I have the specialty equipment to clean up those recordings. I mean, it's called isotope, and I can take practically any noise that's in there out, and all the pops and scratches are gone. I also have publicists who have hired me, and the producer, to take noise out of their programs, or in one case, if you go to YouTube and Google my name, I'm all over the place with this publicist in Arlington who happens to promote her work through our joint work on the podcasts. And she takes my interviews and cuts it down to about 5 minutes and uses that to promote her work. So I get paid through that, and then this other person who is in public broadcasting, she has worked in the field of audio for a long time for productions, and so she'll do interviews or anything else and sends them to me, and then I will clean them up and do some editing on them and send them out and get paid that way too. So it's nice. Later on, we'll get to a question is there a living to be made? So be ready with
And the
your
answer
questions.
is,
What was that?
Or is that,
Yeah,
how much money you make a month?
Guy, let's just get into that question right now. So can you really make a living doing this? Because you're going down that path.
Absolutely not. You're better off in race car driving. Actually, it's good. It's not that it's unavailable as a living, but if you're small time, like I am, it's variable. So I'll have in 1 month 15 or 20 stations pick up, and that's good. I can do that. It's a nice check when I get it. But the next month it goes dry. So it's just a hit and miss. I wouldn't call it a living. That's one of the areas that's becoming more and more challenging. Just to mention, there's a lot of material out there. People give it away. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it and make a living, I'll tell you that. But because there's so much that's free, but then you get these wonderful announcers who's made really good living in broadcasting. Bill Moyers, okay?
Yeah.
So he retires, but he keeps doing it. And since he doesn't need the money, it's free. I'm going to compete with him. I'm charging? Whoa! Who's going to? Actually, no, I love his work, but that becomes a bigger challenge because all of this great material, I mean really good material, is available for free. So it's becoming more and more challenging as time goes by. Interestingly, my income has gone gradually up for the past 7 years. Each year it's just a little bit more. Yeah, I'm not disappointed about that, but is it a living? No. I don't recommend it. So, I'm going to turn this over. You have any questions so far? Yes.
like many people, I inherited a bunch of 78 records, which I
Yes.
would hate to throw away, and there was like no market for them. Are you interested in taking them off my hands and out of my garage?
My collection is devoted to 1920s.
Yeah,
So anything after 1933 is modern.
okay. I have stuff that fits your, are you interested in things like that?
It depends on who it is. If it's Artie Shaw or Benny Goodman, it depends on if it's early Benny and early Artie, because they recorded in the 20s initially, before the big band came along. But if it says Artie Shaw Orchestra, probably not.
But things like Paul Whiteman, or I have these,
Paul
some
Whiteman,
of these things I
very
have no idea who
collectible.
the heck they
Yeah,
are.
Yeah. I say collectible, interestingly, I chose the wrong business. I wish I would have gone to stamp collection, because if I have to move, it's monstrously hard. Stamp collecting, you just pick it up and walk away.
Yeah, they're heavy.
But the other thing is, what I was purchasing in the dollars of 1975 to buy these wonderful recordings, they have just gone through the floor. What I bought for $7 back in 1975, probably will sell for $25, maybe, if I can find somebody out there. There's this one restoration company in Canada who advertises themselves as having the music that kids are going to throw away. I love that. That's exactly right. So I will turn it over to you.
Is Shaving Cream song, that's in the 20s.
Yes.
Yeah, that one.
Oh, absolutely.
The kids introduced me to the Shaving Cream song. You should look it up. It's pretty funny. Dr. Demento.
Dr. Demento, yes.
Shaving cream.
Be nice and clean.
Be
Shave
nice and
every
clean.
day and you'll always win.
Instead of saying,
And the rest of it's X-rated.
yeah, it's definitely not a song you would think from the 20s. All right, guys, so here's a couple questions, and I do want to bring it back to technology for a minute, because that's this group, right? So tell me about the technology involved in getting your program syndicated on 300 plus stations around the world.
Okay. That's a real nice, easy one. Thank you. I like that softball. My programs I produce at home, and I send it. This is the amazing part. It could not have happened 15 years ago. I can send it so easily to Public Radio Exchange and post it, do all of the work around the write-up for that program to try to attract people to the program. It's posted, I don't have to do anything with it, I'm done, and then suddenly I'll get a notice that AUNM has picked up the program that I just put on the air a few days earlier. And so that's how it works. It's a real simple
It's a marketplace.
process. It's a marketplace. There are several hundred independent producers, and I'm not blowing my own horn here, but I finished several years in the top 10 in distribution.
That's great. What, from your podcast software, which one do you find works best for you?
I send it to PRX and they handle the podcast.
Okay, so you're recording it just through.
Well, I put it into waveform, and if anybody needs an explanation of what this is, I record everything into waveform at 32 bits.
Okay.
And then that's the master copy, and then I put it into 8-bit enhanced, because MP3 is what we think of, that's 8-bit. Am I losing anybody here? Stop me, I don't mean to be absurd. But I do that. So it's 8-bit, but then they enhance it, it's called MP2. Everything you hear on public radio is through MP2, not MP3, because it's the lowest quality. And I might have a chance to get to that. Nails on a chalkboard?
No, so, but Stuart's asking what actual hardware and software you use to record your program.
Oh, to record the program? Oh, I apologize. I have several Pro Tools. Is the one I use most often. If you're familiar with Avid, it's a wonderful program. I have another one that sounds disastrous. It's called Hindenburg Journalist Pro.
Visions of exploding blimps.
That isn't even the punchline. Actually, the reason they call it that is because you get this image of the Hindenburg coming down, and this poor announcer screaming into the microphone, "Oh, the humanities!" screaming it over and over again, and it's total distortion. It just kills the microphone. Well, what they do to promote their work is leave you a little trace of that, and it starts off distortion, and it becomes perfect audio. It sounds like it was recorded yesterday in somebody's living room. It is just phenomenal. They have all of these systems to allow you to do that. And if that's not good enough, I have another program called Isotope that allows me to go in and fine-tune the distortion in anything. And if we're standing here interviewing a dump truck is outside, I can take that out and it doesn't affect the conversation. It is just amazing. I was interviewing a woman this morning, and there was an issue with noise behind her. This was good. She was in her home, and the park was nearby, and you could hear the kids, but this other noise was there. It turned out, I asked her after we were through, because I knew I could take it out, I didn't want to interrupt the interview. She said, "Oh, that's a heater." Was it too noisy? I said, "Don't worry about it." So I was able to take the noise out of there. The heater's gone. You still hear the kids. And it was great. It sounded live and active. And so, yeah. So,
That answer, yeah.
Yeah.
Good job. All right, Guy, thank you. So step me back a little bit, zooming out a little bit about the media, because that was sort of how I built tonight, was how technology has altered media as the way we consume it in the era of sound bites and headlines, and I'm guilty of it. I don't have enough time, so I just read a headline. I'm making a snap decision upon what I read. I let my wife give me the executive summary because she reads the whole paper. But what do you see as the greatest challenge facing media today?
Brian, you nailed it. It's competing for our attention every minute of the day. We don't have time to read all of the information. Your wife and my wife must know each other very well, because she reads in detail. But most people don't. In fact, the vast majority of us don't. We read the headlines, maybe the first paragraph, and miss the story. And there are times, if you read the headline only, and then get to the third or fourth paragraph, you realize the headline is actually misleading. That happens more often than not, and it's one of those little irritations. But the fact that the vast array of media that's available to us now, overwhelmingly so, is actually distorting the
Attention.
honesty of our information. Yes, the attention, distorting our. Here is a key, and think about it this way. What we are asking for as consumers today is affirm my thoughts. Affirm what I'm thinking. If you can't affirm what I'm thinking, I'll go someplace else. So Brian was talking a little earlier about Democracy Now! Well, they're affirming information for someone that is interested in progressive information. They're only going progressive. Fox News is targeting, affirming information that's targeting the right wings. So you get those on all sides. The problem is that broadcasters in general are starting to draw more and more into the need to brand themselves through affirmation rather than actually providing important information. That makes-
Unbiased is a,
Yeah, it is really challenging now. When I first got into the business, it was analog. And there was something called the fairness doctrine and the equal time doctrine. That's wiped away now. It happened in the 1980s in the Reagan administration. It was thought, well, let's free things up. Let's make things so much easier for everybody to carry anything they want to. They got rid of equal time and they got rid of the idea of having balanced news all the time. And it's odd for me because it's freed me up in some ways, but at the same time, I'm not comfortable with that level of possibly distorting the information. That's still, I'm new to that part of the business.
well, and so since technology and our attention span has really been the culprit, what, if anything, do you think technology can do to fix the problem that it's sort of created?
Oh, now that's not a softball. That is really a wicked curve because it can go anywhere at any time. I'd like to think I have the answer to that. And I've thought about this many, many times when I interview and I'm thinking of a question and I realize, you know what, that's not good. That's leading the person I'm interviewing. And this is what is happening now. We're being led by broadcasters, and I know I do that. I'm not saying I'm not guilty of it. I'm very aware of it, but I'm cautious. The problem is the very heart of what's bringing about the cause of the problem is also the one who's going to fix it. I'm not sure. And here is a prime example, Facebook. Facebook really went hog wild 2 years ago and distorted their program by allowing the abuse of the system to dictate what the people on the other end were wanting to receive as the affirmed information. So they get it back, and it becomes an echo chamber that just goes out in massive ripples. Whether or not all of that had that major of an influence, we don't know. We don't even have the ability to test it well enough. But the problem is that Facebook announced that, okay, we made a mistake, we're sorry about that, won't happen again, we're going to go self-governing. We are going to tackle this problem right now. So they did. And I don't know if you heard the breaking news about 2 months ago. These journalists decided that they would test the way Facebook allowed people to post their material. And so they used the names of the senators and said, I am Senator Crocker and I want to post this on blah, blah, blah. And, oh, sure, you're welcome to do that. And then they push off this information recruiting, they did this, recruiting information for ISIS to see what would happen. Nothing from Facebook. Nothing. And it took about 30 days, and they were getting these phony returns from people, and they finally went to Facebook and said, look, you have a serious problem. And Facebook said, oh yeah, it's really hard to govern that. Okay. What they were doing, it turns out, was attempting to govern it through bots. And it was picking up certain words, but then it required the attention of a living person to say, oh, look, there's attention called to this. It says ISIS recruiting. Good, now what do we do? So it never was addressed properly. So I'm not sure if we're ready to handle that. And the challenge is it's only getting worse. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, I heard something recently on a TED Talk about astroturfing. Have you heard about this?
I know the term. I haven't read enough about it yet.
What it means is, like, basically whatever agenda you want to promote, you create all these fake alternate sources of that information to confuse people toward what you want them to believe.
Oh.
So really, I mean, we're living in 1984 by George Orwell here.
Yeah, we are, yeah. And the other thing that goes right along with that is that BBC did an 11-year study on the release of news and information. MIT picked it up last year and started working with them. They found out that fake news travels 70% faster than real news. And real news over a long period of time becomes too boring. And so it drops off, and the fake news overwhelms it. It's like a big tidal wave that comes back and fills the void. And they don't know how to address it. What do you do? Because the fake news is so salacious. It's more interesting. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's going to be a separation of society, like people who want to stay tuned into the media and the sensationalism and movies that are a bunch of bang bang, shoot 'em up, tits and ass, all that stimulation, and then people like me who are out riding their horse and teaching people to cook well and having dinners with friends and not in the media and satisfied with like these like awesome, simple joys of life versus all the stimulus. I have not had a TV since 1995. That was my TV. I was 18.
Well, I got upset with Sonic Cable TV in 1986 and canceled mine. However, 3 months ago I came back. I was only angry for 33 years.
Well, being discerning and choosing through Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever is awesome. Movies are great, but all those commercials and all those shows are so...
It's crazy.
What would you recommend us, humans, to figure out what news information, how do I look at an article or look at a broadcast and decipher it? What are some of the key things that you would
I
like?
appreciate that very much. That
No
question
softball,
is
right?
excellent. That's not even a softball. You have to do some work to do it. But let me give you a story of this publicist in Los Angeles who called me. She stopped calling, and that's okay. But she would call me regularly and pitch a book. Usually it was far left, and she would give me this information, and I would say, "Well, Patricia, I have to vet it." And she'd say, "Oh no, you don't. I have vetted it." No, that's not the way it works. And she would push just so far and not get an okay, I'll try it. And finally just gave up on me, which is okay because I don't have time to do the serious vetting that would be required for this. But if you want to vet, as I have to, I go to factcheck.org. That's the first thing. That's my primary source. There's also Snopes, isn't it pronounced Snopes? S-N-O-P-E-S. And there are others. The Underground is another one that tries to search out and find false information and warn me about it. So I will do that. If I want a story that I want to do an interview on, I will check those sources before I guarantee the interview. What I do with authors and those who want me to interview, I'll say, send me the book, let me take a look at it, give me about a week with it. If I need that much, I'll call you back. Then what I do is start the book and then check sources, fact check.
Question that I might have is, and I don't know your leanings politically,
Okay?
Snopes and fact check. I know people of both persuasions, and each one says that those organizations are biased to the different areas.
I
And
know.
that's a problem that we have
Yeah.
as human beings.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. How do you get around that? Well, my own experience, and that comes from years. I've been using fact checking for quite a period of time. I would say 2006 was when I first started using something similar to that. And fact check was the one that became the primary. I have never been misled by fact check. However, that being said, still someone could hear the point of view and say, that's false. So how do you get around that?
Christian, how does fact check stay in business? Do they have
Private
advertising?
funding.
Fundraisers, right? They fundraise.
They fundraise, I send them a check once in a while. Shows how old I am.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Can you imagine any scenario in which the genie of the fairness doctrine gets put back in the bottle?
No, too many people oppose it. It's very interesting because it was restricting. The biggest headache for broadcasters, television and radio both, they had to do so much paperwork. And then they had to worry if they didn't have the paperwork together, they could be audited and fined by the Federal Communications Commission. And back then, the FCC had teeth, and they had personnel, and they came out and inspected without notification, so you could be caught without all the information you want. And they, when you were inspected, they went through with fine-tooth comb. Yeah, they don't have that anymore.
To play the devil's advocate somewhat, I mean, growing up in the world of Walter Cronkite, Huntley Brinkley, Americans had the expectation the media was supposed to be unbiased, but in Europe that was not the concept. So when I go to Germany and I pick up a newspaper, I know I am buying a certain viewpoint.
Right.
And isn't America transitioning to that, but still thinking that it's supposed to be neutral?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that. And that's exactly, if you ask most of us, our media is free, our press is free, and it doesn't express obvious bias. Excuse me, it does. Everywhere, including me. I'm not saying I'm immune, because I feel like I'm on a mission. I have to override some of this.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute, that's what MSNBC feels, that's what Fox feels, that's... Okay, I know it's a falsehood, but I'm willing to admit it. On the other side of that, I don't know if that will change, and that's part of the reason we'll never return to the... I shouldn't say never, it could happen. I don't think we will, because they're not going to build the FCC back to where it was. So if you don't have a regulating agency, it's not going to do any good. Does that answer the question?
Well, partly, I think in Europe they have the expectation there's going to be bias.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But you know which is which.
Here we still sort of think in the old days, but yet I want my echo bias, so I watch certain TV stations which reflect my bias, and I don't watch the stations my parents
Absolutely.
watch which reflect their bias. So,
Having read and been a big fan of the New York Times for decades,
yeah.
and used to subscribe, now I get it simply on air with a minor fee, but very expensive paper, even when I stopped subscribing back in 2000. But it irritates me sometimes because I read their bias, I see what they're doing, and as I was mentioning a moment ago, you read the headline and you get one impression, but you go into the paper and you get another outcome altogether, and you wonder why they wrote the headline. When I was saying that, I was thinking of an article in the New York Times I read across about a month ago. Like, why are they doing this? Well, I don't mean to single them out, because I still have a lot of respect for them, but it's the diminishing quality that's there.
Yeah.
I found a similar thing looking at some of the technical papers that are published,
Yeah,
where they're typically, you get this summary. And the summary is what most people read.
Yeah.
But then if you go through the paper and you read it, it's like, well, wait a minute. The newspaper used the summary to make they didn't actually read the paper. The paper says something totally different. And it's like, it really is odd. It distorts the whole science aspect of it.
it really is. It really is.
It's also confusing. Is it really worth our life force? How much time?
If you want the news, get Alexa.
e-reader, KCBX, and KCBX is now owned by American General Media or something.
KCBX?
Yeah.
No, no, no.
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 That's fake news.
That's the,
I hope you're wrong. KCBX is independent. It's like you own KCBX. KCBX is
Publicly
community
funded.
owned and operated, literally, and no one can buy it. It would be a huge story if American, maybe you're thinking of
KCPS.
KPY or
KBC.
KBC.
KBC is now American General Media.
Yes, Chris.
I see a point where we're starting to get this pressure context with this. The pressure is building on the context of the news. You know, everything from our president calling it out to the number of sources, to fake news, to Facebook. Do you see a tipping point in the future? And if you do, what do you think that tipping point is where you just see us going towards? That sometime we're going to veer towards something. What do you think that something is?
Now that's another one that you just threw.
I'm not giving you a softball.
Yeah, the issue is, I don't think we can return.
I'm not saying we're return, but we're going to pivot. Where are we pivot to?
We need to pivot, yeah, but where do we go? At present, I'm feeling that we are going to become more and more divided as a country, and it's going to be partly on the backs of media, because the media are a mirror of the people. But we come right back to that, are you collecting affirmation or information? Most of us now have turned to affirmation, and it's an overwhelming number of us. I don't want to get into the depression side. I really don't want to give you a downer for your day. That's not the idea. You'll just drink too much beer. No, actually, we are going to pivot to a different way of consuming news and repeating it. I'm hopeful that the media are going to be able to govern it better, and therefore you will be alerted. This is what I see as a possibility. You will be alerted at what is potentially fake news. However, that said, that could also be controlled by another organization that comes in and falsifies that. So we are growing too fast with our new media. And I hesitate. You had a question. Oh, okay.
have you seen that actual investigative journalism has decreased over the years?
To a degree, yes. If you're looking for true, honest, investigative journalism, I'd strongly recommend ProPublica, propublica.org. They do nothing salacious. They don't do any sensational information, but when they go into depth, they really, truly go into depth, and you can, on the article, and this is what I have so much respect for in the modern technology day, all the links that are there. You can go to ProPublica, probably the best in the business of information gathering. They will have fact-checking as you read. So you go into the article, and as soon as you find yourself saying, where does that information come from? You go to it, you can get the source, you can get the study, everything is right there, and then go back to the article. It drives me crazy. It reminds me of when I studied chess, and you had 3 or 4 chessboards set up. What if this move was made, next thing you knew, anyhow.
Next thing you know, you're there for 2 or 3 hours.
Is that all?
Reading.
Oh, I know.
One link to another link.
It's great and time consuming.
Yeah.
That's the same question. How do they stay in business? Are they donation?
ProPublica, it's the same thing. They have.
Raise money, they have to
it's
raise
like-
money.
It's very much
To me,
like.
there's a kind of related question that maybe you didn't get into. Are people willing to pay for quality journalism? I mean, it doesn't
Yeah,
sound like
yes.
In general, though.
Like the
I don't know,
monetization
anybody
model
here
of the
pay for
future.
journalism?
I
They
donate
just
to,
click to the next free one, you know?
Yeah, no, I donate to ProPublica and I donate to Fact Check. Those are my primary sources.
And you can donate to public media, our local KCBX, like my email
Yes,
is kcbx.net.
yes,
And $3 a month or something goes to support public radio.
yeah.
And the Guardian just celebrated a million donation.
Ah,
Paid subscribers.
Yeah,
Even
perfect.
outside of your pay.
perfect.
Yeah, that's important. So, to wrap it up, and you guys can ask all the questions you want, but the question I had for Guy, and this kind of goes to the thing of what would it say on your tombstone, but what's next and what do you hope to accomplish before you die?
I like that. And this is, there are two heroes.
Virtual.
There are a lot of heroes in my background, but in my profession in my professional journalism, it's, you mentioned Walter Cronkite, it's the other fellow who preceded him. You might know him by name.
Eric Severide? Eric Severide. I'm dating myself. Eric Severide.
No,
No,
not
not Eric?
anybody?
Bill Moyers.
Who?
Bill Moyers?
No, actually,
Edward R. Murrow.
Edward R. Murrow.
Edward R. Murrow. He created modern journalism in the form, his rooftop, if you haven't heard the broadcasts he did in London, during the bombing, he would be on the rooftop, and you could hear the bombing, and he would comfortably be in your living room delivering these unbelievable addresses in journalism. And he's the first one who actually established a newsroom that had fair and honest
Yeah.
reporting.
What year? In so the 40s?
Well, he emerged in about 1938 and then, no, 1936, and then the bombing in London was 38. Yeah, and he hired Eric Severide. Yeah, yeah. So I have a poster of him, a little small photograph. And on the other side of that, and here I'm getting to your question, because I have one of this fellow who was a lawyer in Arkansas, Scipio Africanus Jones. Anybody ever heard of him? When I was challenged with some of the work I was trying to get off the ground 6 years ago, and it had hit about 7 years ago when I started, but at the first year it was a challenge, and I was surprised at how challenging it was. And I was sitting out back, and my wife comes out, and she has this little postcard she wrote out. What would Scipio do? That's now below the photograph. But I have a photograph of him. If you want to look up an amazing individual, black man, lawyer in Arkansas, who in 1919 took on the case of what was called the Elaine Massacre, and the death row inmates, 12 of them, all black men, who were in self-defense. I know that never happens, but it was. In self-defense, they murdered a white policeman. Never mind that thousands of their own people died. The process, that no one was ever tried for that. But he was able, as a black man in 1921, defeat after defeat after defeat, end up in the Supreme Court and win in the Supreme Court. Argued the case for the innocence of these 12 on death row. And you read that story, and the reason I bring this out, I did a docudrama on it a number of years ago. I wanted to do a full-on interview with constitutional lawyers to see his court case. I want to carry it a step further. But the docudrama stands as a 2-hour In a believable story. If you ever get a chance to read his story, it's just mind-boggling.
How can we get that, access to that?
I'll give you that, it's on Public Radio Exchange. It was posted there a number of years ago, a few stations had broadcasted it, but I.
So it's an audio docudrama?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I have a publisher friend who wanted to turn it into video, but we haven't been able to raise the funding on it. So anyhow, before I demise, I want to complete this program in honor. I know it's not going to go anywhere. I know he's not going to be enshrined. He should be. They have a school in Little Rock, Arkansas, named after Scipio Africanus Jones. So anyhow.
That's great. Good. All right. Thank you, Guy, everybody.